Dieser Beitrag dokumentiert den Vortrag Gypsy Loreism and Romani Agency, der am 12. Dezember 2025 von Dr. Dezso gehalten wurde.
So now we're done with the organizational part, and I am very, very glad to welcome you, Dr. Dezso, to our Romani Academy. It is a pleasure to me that last time I was the speaker, and now I have the capacity to just pass on the mic symbolically and let you be the speaker of today. So we are all very curious about today, and I would like to present first you, so everybody knows what high visitors we have today. So Dr. Dezso is a distinguished scholar in the fields of critical Romani studies, racism against Roma, and structural racism. He earned his PhD in the interdisciplinary sociology from Edwards Lorand University. I didn't check how you say that. I'm so sorry.
Very good.
Currently serves as a research fellow at the Interdisciplinary Center for European Studies at Europa-Universität Flensburg. And as well, you are a visiting research fellow at the Research Center on Anti-Gypsyism at Heidelberg University. You have been in institutions such as the Central European University's Romani Studies program, the Center for Higher Education and Equity Research at the University of Sussex, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and Södertörn University's Department of Critical Romani Studies. And you were also deputy chair of the Barbara Lippe Academy at the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture. So today, your presentation has this very interesting term. We've started last time with what is Gypsy Loreism, actually. I think we will hear more about that. And Romani Agency. I want to say a few words before we start with the topic. So today, this year is a learning space, but also a space of exchange among Romani people. Romani and Sinti people. What we really want is that we are open to discussion and that we also keep the space free of discrimination. As we are a self-organization of Romnia and Sintice, it is very important for us to have a safer space in here. That does not mean that we are not open for any scientific discussion. We love scientific discussions, so we would love to also talk about terms and terminology, but every Romani person is absolutely free to talk how they would talk. So, I am very, very glad that you're here, and I will not do the mistake to introduce your topic, as I know you can do that much better than I do. So thank you so much for being here, and a warm welcome to him, please.
Disclaimer. Wir möchten Sie darüber informieren, dass in diesem Vortrag eine diskriminierende Bezeichnung für Romnia und Sintize häufig verwendet wird. Der Vortrag setzt sich mit der G-Law Society auseinander. Daher ist es teilweise notwendig, den diskriminierenden Begriff zu nennen, um diese Organisation und ihre Arbeit historisch einzuordnen und zu kritisieren. In rassismuskritischer Arbeit können diskriminierende Begriffe zur Quellenkritik, historischen Einordnung oder Analyse genannt werden. Schriftlich markieren wir solche Begriffe in den Untertiteln als G-Wort. Bei mündlichen Vorträgen liegt die Entscheidung über Form und Häufigkeit der Begriffsverwendung bei unseren GastreferentInnen.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for inviting me. And it's a really privilege to being here in a space which is Roma-led, a Romani and Sinti-led organization. I think this is always a special occasion for me to little bit step out from my own privileged university bubble, and I just would like to also mention that before, or actually along with my academic career, I was very much focusing on intersectional anti-Gypsyism as well, which means that in early 2010, 2015, when Romani LGBTI issues was not really on the topic, some of our colleagues and friends, we started to initiating at European level. We were advocating for Romani LGBTI recognition, and so we are happy that there is a discussion already about that, and actually we were initiating based on Romani feminism or Romani feminist discourses. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that this kind of movements, that they are interlinking with each other. So when I'm speaking, I speak as a Romani LGBTI person who has a higher education, but I will never forget my roots. So it is, I think this is very important when we talk, like, institutions are institutions, but still there are memories and there are also narratives which are affecting our scholarship. So today I'm talking from the position as a Romani LGBTI person and who finished higher education as well and working at different institutions. Also, I would like to note before I start my official talk that this presentation supports my habilitation project, which means hopefully I will become a big professor in the German Akademie. But also I'm using in this talk different terms and terminologies which is not really reflecting to my identity. When I'm using the G word, I'm not using as reflecting to people. I use it as a social construct and as a racist or biased constructions by the society, which is affected Romani people everyday's lived experiences and histories as well. So when I'm using the G word, then it is clearly racist and biased constructions. Also, I would like to note that in some cases I have to use it because of the academic frameworks. Unfortunately, we do not have at the moment better. But hopefully, once we can change it. Especially, I'm speaking about when I will quote some leading scholarships, some articles. Then I have to use the G word, so I have to pronounce it out. So, and also I would like to support my talk with my paper. So I will read it up, but also I will just sometimes step it out. So with this note, I just would like to speak in the next 35 minutes about the so-called topic, which is Gypsy loreism and Romani agency. For each topic, for each term, I will give a clear understanding what I understand about Gypsy loreism and Romani agency and how these kind of frameworks and topics were kind of influencing Romani memories and lived experiences as well. So, but before I start, or let's start with this, as a terminological notes and ethics, I think this is always the basic or grand work when I start to speak about Romani studies or Romani issues or people as us. So as a terminological note in my work, I use Sintice and Romnia, Romani people, which not only refers to my individual identity as Rom or Roma, but also I'm arguing that the stigmatizing term as the G is the naming of the others based on their unknown past, socioeconomic background, cultural practices, and linguistic patterns of Romani people. Historically and linguistically, Romani people have never called themselves G. This derogatory term, this derogatory racist term, it's only used in public spheres, basically used by non-Romani people, labeling Romani people. So in the public spheres, they name themselves Romani people, G sometimes, because of the majority and expectation and countless oppressive assimilation and integration policies and practices as well. Therefore, based on the social power, but mainly and not only, subconsciously the self-naming of Romani people have changed and thrived over the past centuries as the so-called Gs in the memories, in our memories. Based on the preliminary work, also I argue that anti-Gypsyism is a transhistorical, transnational, and transgenerational phenomenon that constitutes a special form of racism directly impacting Sintice and Romnia. Anti-Gypsyism has deprived and repressed Romani people's agency And under agency, I understanding identity politics, practices, self-articulation, self-representation, and emancipations of Romani people, which are based not only on everyday adorings and pejorative perceptions of those who are labeled as Gs in the public imagination, but also rooted in social distancing, physical acts, and systemic oppressions. Here in the screen you can see a so-called matrix of anti-Gypsyism, which I believe that it's constructed Romani, Sintice, and Romnia people racist labeling as Gs. So basically anti-Gypsyism is based on non-Romani discourses, racist discourses on Romani people, the public ideas and beliefs, institutional, physical, social distances, social and political principles. Just to give a few examples, under discourses on Romani people, I understand as everyday kind of stereotypes like Gs are stealer, thieves, and so on, so on. The public ideas and beliefs is also kind of underlines the previous one, but also so public ideas and beliefs is also means that the different exotizations of Romani bodies, especially of Romani women bodies, that Romani people are great dancers, they have different habits of lives, and so on and so on. Institutional, physical, and social distance, clearly the school segregations or segregations by place of Romani people, which means of living conditions. And the social and political principles, which I argue under the forced assimilations and forced or false integrational politics and practices. Unfortunately, or maybe not, until 1990s, early 2000s, societies, they were thinking that assimilation politics are very great of Romani people, but we have to recognize, or we have to say actually clear loud out that assimilation politics are, in my point of view, is a form of anti-Gypsyism in our societies. So moving forward, Sintice and Romnia agency in the past centuries have been a troubling legacy in academic and artistic representation that resulted in academic anti-Gypsyism. Academic anti-Gypsyism I understand as academic knowledge which are written on Sintice and Romnia and has a biased or racist perceptions on Romani people. So these social and historical notions structurally embedded forms of epistemic and structural biases and stereotypical representations that have shaped the ways in which Romani people have been researched, misrepresented, and excluded in academic and public discourses as well. As a current critic of them, these academic thoughts from the 1850s up to the early schools of critical Romani studies until the 2010s, often presented results from external standpoints and perceptions that instrumentalized and exploited Sintice and Romnia as research objects, and in countless cases through a racist, classicist, and exoticized orientalistic perspectives. Therefore, Romani agency are excluded from public memories that resulted in limiting access to the knowledge productions. We also have to note, and it's important to echo for us, that Romani cultural heritage is influential globally. However, their agency lack recognition in academic and cultural institutions. Neither this deconstruction nor reconstructions of the Romani memories, emancipation, and self-articulation can be recognized without taking into critical account the ambivalence that is inherited in the structures of anti-Gypsyism. Until now, it is not known how anti-Gypsyism blocked the recognition of Romani agency, Sintice and Romnia memories, and the question is how academic anti-Gypsyism as a form of structural racism that had historically excluded undermine Sintice and Romnia knowledge production, memories, and narratives in our societies. By deconstructing anti-Gypsyism and acknowledging Romani agency, European societies could cultivate a dignified collective past and awareness. Recognizing Sintice and Romnia past events and knowledge production could support the appreciation of the present and critically review the often biased constructions of the so-called Gs. Moving forward, apologies for these slides, but this is a very kind of shocking slide, which I often show in my presentation. These are the academic labels on Romani people, how non-Romani societies, how non-Romani academic knowledge production were labeling in different disciplines Romani people in academic knowledge productions. So also in this talk, I argue for establishing an academic framework of Romani agency reparation aiming to recognize the past experiences and events, memories and lived experiences of Sintice and Romnia, and to integrate them into European knowledge production, academic agenda and values, as these memories of Sintice and Romnia are part of the European cultural values, not as a simply side of it, but these are an integral values of European societies. So in this open lecture, I address two main objectives that are currently underrepresented in the international European and US American academic literature, covering the period from the Age of Enlightenment in the early 1850s until up to the 1950s. In this dialogue, this dialogue is grounded in ethically responsible and methodologically rigorous approaches aiming to bridge historical scholarship with contemporary critical frameworks, with integrating results from sociology, history, and cultural studies, as you can see above. It positions Sintice and Romnia as active participants of knowledge production rather than passive subject of inquiry. So my work is actually based on critical, post-colonial, and intersectional methodologies that center and places Sintice and Romnia past events into European values and belongings with reparative agency. To advance reparative Romani agency within the social sciences, I aim to undertake a critical analysis of the establishment of the so-called Gypsy Lore Society, including the foundational schools of knowledge production, which is known in the very early period, the Romani Rai, that articulated Gypsy Loreism, while offering case studies. I will offer two case studies that foreground or could foreground Romani agencies. So the starting point of the reparative Romani agency in the social sciences is a critical analysis of the so-called Romani Rai period, which started in 1850s until the 1890s. Until the 1890s, prior to the establishment of the Gypsy Lore Society, which was established in 1888 in Liverpool. So this organization was actually a leading organization which were producing every knowledge about Romani people or the so-called Gs, which is actually the groundwork of knowledge production, and it's often led by biased and racist perceptions as well. So, but back to the Gypsy Lore Society. So this period of 1880s represented the core intellectual network of the time and played a central role in shaping and pre-institutionalizing the romanticized, racialized, and often appropriative forms of knowledge production, as well the public perceptions of the so-called Gs in the Europe and beyond. While prior scholarship has reflected on the Romani Rai production in relation to these biased constructions and imaginaries, this remains little concrete knowledge to considerable uncertainty regarding the network background, principal members, and core objectives. So what I want to say that we know that there is the Gypsy Lore Society, but actually there are not so much knowledge about that at the moment. There are different publications, but there are not really knowledge that have Romani agency or Romani people, they were part of Gypsy Lore Society, or have Romani agency were challenging the Gypsy Lore Society racist perspectives. And this is, I think it's interesting because we can speak about the Gypsy society as a kind of institution which produce racist knowledge on Romani or Sinti people. But also we have to take into account Romani agency as they were already started to deconstructing these biases, and why we don't talk about that already in 1880s. So placing reparative Romani agency in scholarly discourse is crucial to uncover and examine the silenced Romani self-representations, self-articulation and emancipation to different events which actually were neglected, and they are placed in different archival memories. And also parallel with this, I arguing that it's important to employ critical academic deconstructions of the schools of gypsyology and gypsy loreism. That what does it mean actually? What does it mean, the school of gypsyology and gypsy loreism? Because we can speak about this institution, but I think these institutions, there is an ideology which influenced everything of the constructions of on Romani people until today. So through this scholarship, we can kind of deconstruct this knowledge through the school of anti-Gypsyism studies, critical Romani studies, or anti-Romani racism studies as well. So by centering the past Romani agency and recovering forgotten memories within these schools and frameworks, this actually can deconstruct and reconstruct centuries of biased scholarship through the development of a new academic reparative frameworks, which we can call reparative Romani agency. And this also can kind of bring back the memories of our ancestors, and we can speak about them in a way when we can honor them past actions and memories and lived experiences. So the roots of Orientalism and Gypsy loreism, a few words about this. So in the late 700s, it started all. So in the late 700s, Sir William Jones was a British lawyer and scholar in East India, introduced the term Orientalism in the context of colonial administration. As early as 784, Jones was advocating and focusing on the country's Great Britain language, culture, customs, and additionally, he was advocated to nurture resources to strengthen industrial capitals of colonized people. So while Nathaniel Brazy Hall had agreed with Jones on the importance of harnessing indigenous scholarship, Hall had introduced elements in his scholarship advocating for the domination and colonial control to the discourse. Most notably, philosopher and political economist John Stuart Mill in 1874, Anglicist theory of the benevolent despotism, also promoted the domination and education of the colonized population by the colonizer cultures, ultimately advocating westernization. What does it mean? Orientalism emerged currently with economic capitalism and with the political control and manipulation of knowledge production, artistic expression, and representation, which also can actually apply to Romani people as well. So Ken Lee, in his seminal work in Orientalism and Gypsy loreism, argues that Orientalism extends to creating this exotic other, with Gypsy loreism representing this exotic other in Europe through an Orientalist discourse of othering that historically perpetuated through arts, culture, academic institution, and religious bodies as well. In this Gypsy lorist representation, the G has often been portrayed as romantic, sensual, musical, mysterious, and deeply connected to the nature. Few words about my archival work. So in my archival work, research indicated in the Gypsy Society in 2024-25 was dedicated to examining the Romani agency, calling the Gypsy, through an Orientalistic and colonial lens, with a particular focus on cultural patterns, history, and social issue. So the Gypsy Society was a member-based association until today, actually. Its central scholarly output was the so-called Journal of the Gypsy Society, which is a quarterly publication that became the primary forum for constructing and disseminating knowledge about the G across Europe and beyond. It's important to note that the Gypsy Society Journal was a very privileged space and also a forum for scholars across Europe and beyond. And even though there were Romani intellectuals already in the 1880s, Romani intellectuals did not contribute to this. They did not get access to these journals because different reasons, mainly of exploitation, but I will speak about this later. So back to Gypsy loreism and the Journal of Gypsy Lore Society, I argue that Gypsy loreism is an until today active school of thought that represents this exotic other and take to this level of the biased Gs as Oriental through the constructions of the G, which historically permitted and controlled Romani agency within arts, culture, and academic productions. While the Gypsy Lore Society attracted contribution from the leading scholars and institutions across Europe and the overseas, the Journal of Gypsy Lore Society excluded Romani self-articulation, self-representation, and emancipatory participation. Thereby, these actions consolidated, externalized, and stereotypical representations of Romani people. As a further critic, I argue that the Gypsy Lore Society academic efforts and outputs were acknowledged at the time by international scholarship and public discourse. So my prior research reveals that the agency of Romani critical intellectuals was systematically erased and silenced by the prevailing status quo and the broader structures of anti-Gypsyism operating between both knowledge production and public discourse. Gypsy Lore's discourses and scholarly works have historically determined already in this period early Romani agency, and they were limiting their contribution to the European values and knowledge. I would like to mention here that during the archival work in Liverpool in the Gypsy Lore Society, it was surprising to see for me that basically all the European universities and the leading scholars, they were part of the Gypsy Lore Society. So starting with Oxford, from Heidelberg University, for Budapest University, and all this kind of Harvard and so on, so on. So they were members of the Gypsy Society, and they were contributing to this canon, let's say. And yeah, so it was a shocking experience to see that how huge is this archive, and it was a kind of honor for them to be member of the Gypsy Lore Society at that time, I guess. And we will speak about this later, that what consequences had already or will have. But to know and to see that all the institution which we are gaining or learning our knowledge, they were part of the Gypsy Lore Society, it speaks for itself. So, little bit about the lack of Romani agency and in academic and public discourses. So Edward Said's seminal work of Orientalism details how Orientalist scholarship engaged with authorized views of described, taught, and ruled over the colonized. As I mentioned, Kenley's concept of Orientalism and Gypsy loreism and Patrut's phantasmation gives a detailed and foundational understanding of the structures and embedded functions of anti-Gypsyism in the context of collective memories, identity politics, and the lack of Romani agency in academia and public. The first Gypsy lore school of thought emerged, as I mentioned, around the early 1850s and has granted the foundations of the constructions and perceptions of the Gs. However, until today, there is an ongoing public and academic debate concerning the recognition of the Romani agency and their sufficient representation in academic, arts, and cultural productions. So over the centuries, numerous schools approach emerged that research the origins, language, habits, and cultural patterns of the Gs. However, these schools were developing independently or actually influenced or existed alongside each other and were developed as a result of each other, as I mentioned. These are the schools, just to go back again. So the very first school was so-called the Gypsylogy, which emerged in 1850. The Gypsy loreism was emerged in 1888. In the 1920s was emerged the so-called Gypsy studies. In the National Socialist era was we could talk about biased scientific racist studies on Sinti and Roma. Verena Meyer, who is sitting there, she argues that this period is the period of the school of eugenistics on Sinti and Roma, which is also valid, of course. In the 1980s was emerged the so-called Romology. In the early 2000s was emerged the Romani studies. 2010 was emerged the critical Romani studies, and after anti-Romani racist studies and nowadays we can speak also about anti-Gypsyism studies. But my criticism is that we can speak about these schools, but I often mention this kind of anecdote. When I finished my PhD, I was very happy that I finished and I have a dissertation on our own identity, about my identity, about Romani people. And I was mistaken because I did not write a PhD about Romani people. I wrote about Gajo perceptions on the G people. And this is very interesting to see because I argue that actually everything what we know until 1980s, everything is a perceptions and racist constructions on Romani people by the Gajo society. And our very first knowledge production, our very first kind of academic discussion started in the 1980s with the very early feminist movement. We have to acknowledge that. So feminists, they were deconstructing not only the movements and the societies, Romani feminists, but also they initiated the Romani knowledge production as well. So I'm very provocative in this. I also say that until 1980s, we could not say actually all schools from Gypsylogy until Romology, we could not call it as it is. We could simply call it as a Gajology, because this is how it is. It's a framework by non-Romani people on Romani people. Moving forward, and I don't want to waste the time with this all academic backgrounds, I just would like to mention Herrlich Moritz Gottlieb Grellmann, as you are familiar with his work. His seminal work from 1783, translated into the English in 787. It's titled The Dissertation on the Gypsies. Also, we have to mention Robert Knox, The Races of Men from 1850s, or Sir Richard Burton's The Jew, the Gypsy, and the Al-Islam from 1898, along with Cesar Lombroso, The Criminal Man, translated in 1911, and his criminal biology theories actually exemplified how academic institutions laid the groundwork for the structural racism and anti-Gypsyism, and eventually lead or paved the way of Sinti and Roma Holocaust policies in the 20th century. This is a very strong argument. It can be challenged, but I argue that already these very early studies, already from 780s, they were questioning Romani people, that why we are here, what we are doing here. Some of the scholars already, Grellman, telling that Romani people, they should not be part of the society, there should be a solution, which is in other translation was in the 1930s the final solution. So this academic approach is actually canonized by the Gypsy Lore Society and its various institutional and individual members, as I mentioned, across Europe and American anthropology, sociology, and ethnography. Studies through the 19th and 20th centuries continue to shape mainstream discourse on the so-called gypsies. These contributed directly to generating and maintaining social marginalization, further strengthening academic anti-Gypsyism and raising dignified Romani agency. Even in the late, more anthropologically progressive periods, such as the ethnographic term of the 1950s or 1970s, Romani voices remained marginalized and instrumentalized. So basically, they were not part of the academic discourses. So here are some studies from the 1930s which were actually promoting Romani Holocaust. And this period we can call it the period of Romani eugenistics or biased or scientific racist studies on the Gypsies. As a critical turn, as I mentioned, was started in the late 2010. In the late 20th century, so in that period, critical counter-responses began to emerge with Romani and pro-Romani scholars through critical Romani studies, anti-Romani racism studies, and currently with anti-Gypsyism studies. So this interdisciplinary field were actually established to challenge the dominant anti-Gypsies discourse, critique stereotypical and biased representations, and foster reparative Romani agency in academia, and actually questioning everything what was before, what Gypsy Lore Society or Gypsy Loreism actually created or affected or made, or leaded the Romani agency in the past. So drawing on feminist, decolonial, and post-colonial methodologies, as I mentioned before, this approach, it is fundamental to put Romani agency. So we can understand Romani agency more with different feminist, decolonial, post-colonial methodologies, because without these methodologies is just empty space. So, but I also arguing, however, we have these schools, which is very young schools, if I may say that, a significant gap still remains in the recognition of the Romani past and reparative discourses within broader academic fields such as history, sociology, and memory studies. And why I'm telling this? That I am now very provocative, that we don't know nothing about us. We don't know nothing about us. We don't know our past. We don't know our ancestors. We don't know about our own language, because it was also influenced by Dezso perspectives. And this is this kind of what we think is cultural patterns or cultural memories. Those are also very influenced by the Dezsos. So, and everything what we read in our books, what we see in television, or we facing in everyday discussions or thoughts, it is clearly Dezso perceptions, and I'm questioning what is Romaniness in this sense, or what is Sintitsa and Romani identity. So, and it's a very provocative, but I still, again, we don't know nothing about us because of this. So I just want to mention that these were the kind of challenging or studies which were challenging Gypsy Loreist perspective or Gypsy Loreism, which is, as I mentioned, the core was the Romani feminist movements, and there are heroines who initiated this all movements. But also, I argue that our new generations, not adequately recognizing at the moment those people actions which should. So until we don't honoring and respecting our first, second generational of intellectuals and activists, then we not really can speak about Romani agency until that. So anyway, we can speak about, so these studies were actually placing a kind of deconstructive narratives in academia, like Romani slavery, Romani LGBTI, Romani partisans, Romani Holocaust, and so on, so on. And I just mentioned a few topics that these topics actually were always, like, for example, if we're speaking about Romani feminism or Romani LGBTI people, it is a new topic in 2010, 2020, but I'm pretty sure that in 1125 there were Romani people who were part of Romani LGBTI, or there were also persons who were Romani feminists and they were advocating already in 1555, or I just said now a date. But why we don't know about these people? Where are those memories? And what are the responsibility of our generations to dig up and honor these people? And what are the responsibility of the schools, of these schools which I mentioned, starting from gypsyology until Romology? Why these memories are erased? Why they are neglected? And why, where are those people? So I would like to mention two case studies, which is, I think, very powerful. And yeah, I have these beautiful notes, but I will just say my own words now. So I was, as I mentioned, I did archival work in the Gypsy Society. And like flipping the page, like gypsy, 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 it was very, very heavy and determining. And you change? Okay, sorry. So basically, there is a lot of knowledge or a lot of notes, correspondence letters, manuscripts, which is focusing on so-called Gs. Some of the articles have been never published. And there are postcards, very racist postcards sometimes. There are pictures, different newspaper articles, and I think the God helped me, or it was just a coincidence. I find this article, which you can see in the background, and this article is actually not about a Romani person. It's about a non-Romani person who is questioning the Romani person, that why he is questioning his scholarship. So there is a professor, it's called Professor Knapp. He was a very distinguished linguist, and he was teaching at the Yale University, and he was also a linguist at Madrid University and in different leading institutions. And he was working on Romani language and in different ethnographic studies. And this Professor Knapp, it's good. It's okay. So this Professor Knapp was producing a pretty racist knowledge on Romani people. And there is a person which we call Sidney Gray. And Sidney Gray was asking in a newspaper article, or questioning a newspaper article, this Knapp, that why he is producing racist knowledge on Romani people. And for example, here you can see also in here, it's Romani people, they don't call here already themselves gypsy. They call themselves Roma in 1800s already, right? So this is also kind of fact. I mean, it's also, we can see that how the language changed and the scholarship is changed. So, but just back to the Sidney Gray, as I figure out, in 1888, so the article is published in 1888, March 22, in the New Haven's Morning magazine. It was a tabloid, a journal. And I figured out that this person was graduated at Yale University. He earned a university diploma, a college degree, as a Romani person in 1888. And he was questioning this Professor Knapp. He was kind of challenging him, like, hey, let's have a dialogue, let's have a discussion. Of course, from the Gypsy Law Society, it was not an open discussion. But what is very important, that I mentioned for you, that the Journal of Gypsy Law Society was the canon of knowledge production. What we know, everything about the Gypsies, that was the main academic platform. So this Sidney Gray wanted to kind of intervene, question in a kind of semi-academic way, stepping into the discussion, the academic discussion. But he never could. He couldn't access this space because of privileges and positionalities. So, and therefore, Sidney Gray went to this New Haven Mornings magazine, or whatever is it now, and in that magazine he started to have his own article, and he was producing knowledge, Romani knowledge, as how the society constructing in 1880s the so-called Gs, and it was also including different topics like identities, access to education. In that time, basically the transport line was between Liverpool and New Havens, that how Romani people, they were moving between Liverpool and between US America. So there was a lot of discussions. And basically, I just want to highlight that this kind of topic, it also shows that Romani people in 1880s had already higher education. They could write, they could read, they were challenging academia. And they were kind of transnational already because they were moving between different continents, between Europe and US. And some of the Romani people who was migrating or traveling between US and Europe, so those Romani people, they became American. So this is a kind of also shows the assimilations of Romani people of in the very early time. But also I just want to mention, and this is out of the topic, there is a great scholar, it's called Anne Östendorf. And she's really amazing. I don't know how she's getting to this topic, but she was researching Columbus Christoph diaries and the ship diaries. And maybe you heard, or maybe not, but she discovered that already in Columbus ships there were Romani people as matrosen. You know, this like servants, or some of them had some title or higher rank, but already in Columbus there were Romani people, and the very first people who went to US, it was included also Romani people. So I mean, if you take this into the account, the history which we learn is little bit start to be different. So we are part of the history of the, or not. Why we not speak about this, that Romani people, they were on the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria already, right? And why we don't speak about Sidney Gray, that there was a guy who had a university college from Yale, which is not a very sub-university or institution. So it's a high intellectual. Anyway, so this is also forms that how Romani people were excluded from knowledge. But I want to give another perspective, which is the feminism, Romani feminism. And this is what I mentioned, like Romani feminism, it was already in the public memories in the very early 1800s, very early 1900s, but the academia and society was erasing our sisters, our brothers, our ancestors, because of them gypsiness. Apologize my the language. I want to bring up the case of Esmeralda Locke. Some of the gypsy lorists, they just call her as a gypsy. I'm sorry, I apologize my language. But Esmeralda Locke was an intellectual. She could write, she could read, she wrote book. She had knowledge, and she was a kind of modern papus or a form of papusha. And also, she was exploited by the gypsy lorists such as papusha in the early 1850s. She born in 1850 and passed away in 1939. So basically, Esmeralda Locke that is the sketch of her, and this is actually based on the study of Ken Lee, which was published in 2022. But there are more. There are more which we can talk about Esmeralda Locke, because she was an early proto-feminist, Romani feminist. She was advocating for Romani women rights already in 1900s. And she wanted to work with the gypsy lorists, namely with Dora Yates. She offered, or actually, I'm not sure that who offered to who, but there were a discussion that Dora Yates, who was a distinguished gypsy lorist, offered to write a book together about Romani past, Romani cultural heritage, and so on and so on. But so basically, Esmeralda Locke gave her all her knowledge, experiences, language. She did the research, and then when became the date of publication, Dora Yates was excluding her. She said, like, we can publish the book, but without your name, because you are just a narrator, not a researcher. And here we are again, today, until today, we are not a researcher, we are narrators and activists and butterflies, and so on, so on, so on, so on. This is the issue until today, and this is also surprising that until today, this discourse is in our narratives, that Romani people, because of them, ethnicity or identity cannot be researchers because they are subjective or objective. You know, this is just already shows this, that it was already in the discourse. And just to move forward, so Esmeralda Locke was also questioning why there is no feminist discourse in the gypsy lore society, and why the sisterhood excluding her. I'm talking about Dora Yates, because in this dimension we're just not only talking about anti-gypsyism as a structure of racism, but also of gender-based violence and the lack of solidarity between non-Romani women and the Romani women. And even though Dora Yates was supporting her in some ways, as I'm apologizing again my language, you know, but as today, like sometimes we have these NGOs and they kind of including Romani people, like, yes, we can support you, we can helping you, and so on and so on. But when it's a real action, then is a distance. And this actually happened with Esmeralda as well. Like Dora Yates was supporting her until she was the narrator. But when became the real action, then Esmeralda became the gypsy woman. Apologies for this. And moving further, there was a 1939 Jubilee dinner of Gypsy Lore Society. The story gets more complicated because I call Esmeralda Locke as an early feminist intellectual. And this not only was kind of challenging or provocative for the gypsy lorists, like a Romani woman, what she wants in this academic male-dominated networks, but also the Romani men who were kind of aligning or wanted to be part of the gypsy lore society, they were excluding also Esmeralda Locke. And then, you know, there were these kind of galas or dinners, these very fancy, you know, sometimes they were inviting also let's be positive. Romani people, let's be part of the jubilee. But I think there were more as an attraction that here are the gypsies. So let's have inclusive space. That's my initial thoughts. But this was in the bracket. So anyway, in this case, the gypsy lorists, they were asking a Romani man to exclude, based on her gypsiness and her male dominance, to exclude for all the narratives and from the jubilee dinner Esmeralda Locke, and from that time or from that point she was totally excluded from all the discourses. So she was not only excluded as a Romani woman, but also as a woman, as a Romani woman. So there were a lot of dimensions by gypsy lorists, by own communities. And so her story is a very sad story because she passed away in 1939, and she was hit by a bus, unfortunately, and that's how she passed away. But I believe that these are just two stories of our ancestors or of our memories, and there are more, which is, I think I argue this is our kind of social responsibility to bring back them and speak about them. We don't have to take them as heroes or heroines. We just have to honor their memories, that they are part of our society, they are part of our life. They brought European cultural values, and so on. And just my last slide about what can be a reparation of Romani agency. So first, the acknowledgement should be, but there is no acknowledgement. So we are in nowhere, honestly, because here is this beautiful stage which was based on Afro-American reparation framework, and we are nowhere. We are nowhere because some people, they asking for apology. Like I ask distinguished professors, like, what can happen if Gypsy Society will ask? They will say apologizing for them racist constructions. So we will have a running water. Our sisters will be not raped. The school segregation will be finished. There will be no forced sterilization. There will be no violence on the street against Romani people. So this will change something if the Gypsy Society will apologize. I'm not sure. Because already there is no acknowledgement. So we are missing the very first step of acknowledging of the Romani people agency, memories, cultural contribution, and so on. We are not in the stage one. So I mean, I would be positive, or I want to be positive, but I can't, unfortunately, because we are not on the stage of acknowledging of Romani memories and cultural contribution as European values. And then, if some happens, maybe in 50 years, then they will say this beautiful institution that sorry that we said that you are gypsy and that you are still a thief and you are eating your children, you are killing and raping and so on. I don't know. And then maybe something will start. But until we have very few alliances and critical scholars in our field, and this kind of I call it, apologize, the Hippocratic social movements. I mean, sorry to say this, but our social movements is also kind of exploiting us, as sometimes the gypsy bodies, they should be here, and then when it's real action, then I'm not sure that it's going on something. Yeah, so I just really would like to close here, and thank you so much, and yeah, hopefully I was not overwhelming with my confusion sometimes, but this is what I understand under reparation of Romani agency and the link of gypsy loreism. Yeah.
I am very impressed. Oh,
is it me?
We don't want to watch TV right now.
I don't know why it's connecting my laptop to this. No, I don't have a... It's good that something not different came up, but it's a work computer, but it's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I have to admit, it has been more than a decade that listening to a Romani man has been so inspiring and full of new context to me. So I'm very humbled by the insights you have given to us. Camera. Yes. So I would love to open the floor to questions, because not only we do have a very distinguished scholar here, we also have them in the audience today.
Of course.
So I am sure that there are many very interesting questions. And I welcome all the Romani and Sinti people. Please sit there. All the Romani and Sinti people to ask their questions. I also welcome our colleagues of color to ask their questions. And then, in this order, I welcome all the others. Because we're also setting Romani agency on top of this schedule. Is anybody feeling already brave enough to ask the questions? Dr. Jane Weiss has a question.
Ich mache das auf Deutsch. Kannst du übersetzen, Heidi?
Ja. Du kriegst eine Übersetzung.
Nein, dass du für ihn bitte übersetzt. Ja. Geht das?
Ja.
Cool. Okay. Geht das?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anschalten?
Yeah, it's on.
Yes.
Hörst du? Ja, okay. Hört er mich? Ja, okay. Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank für deinen Vortrag. Hörst du mich? Ja, okay. Du bist ja durch so mehrere Stationen der Wissensproduktion über uns gegangen. Also von 1850 bis in die 1990er Jahre. Ich habe das so verstanden, in den 90ern gibt es diesen Turn zu den Critical Romani Studies. Und ich wollte da nochmal nachfragen, ich habe das nicht ganz verstanden. Du hast eine Art von Kritik angebracht an diesen Produktionen, also Wissensproduktionen in den 90ern. Ja, nee, ich versuche es das gar nicht mit meinen Worten. Ich würde dich einfach noch mal bitten, das zu erklären. Also ich habe eine Idee davon, aber vielleicht kannst du noch mal ein bisschen mehr was dazu sagen, deine Position zu diesen Arbeiten.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the question that I can actually clarify and maybe make it more clear. So basically the critical Romani studies was kind of started in early 2010. So this is after the 2000. In the 1990s, we can speak about let's say, Romani studies or Romology, which is mostly kind of semi schools between critical Romani studies and the schools of bias studies and gypsyology or gypsy loreism. But these schools of Romology and Romani studies, in my point of view, still had they were not kind of strong and brave enough to question the previous schools or the previous knowledge productions. Just for example, to speak about Judith Oakley, who was a scholar, and I mean her knowledge and scholarship is very influential, but she was part of the school of Romani studies and Romology, which is based on ethnographic studies. I mean, I'm not blaming ethnographers and anthropologists, but it's important to distinguish when the discourse became racialized or racist, and some of the ethnographic studies and anthropological studies in the 1990s still in 2000 they were applying the gypsy lorist frameworks from 1800s. Just to give an example, one of my favorite example that, for example, Judith Oakley was categorizing Romani people, actually was categorizing animals based on Romani and non-Romani behaviors. So she was categorizing us. She said, like, these are the kind of gypsy animals, and there are the non-gypsy animals. And the non-gypsy animals always had a kind of, always was kind of more structured, some elegant, some strong. And the gypsy animals, who were living in the wood, who had freedom, and they were linking this kind of anti-gypsy stereotypes through the animals. So actually we went down to the level of animal or in 1990s still, and then it was distinguishing the society. And this was, just was an ethnographic study. And actually it's a racist, so apologize for this, but it was a racist study which is distinguishing Romani and non-Romani people, which also says that Romani people are not part of the society, because until 2000 and until today actually we speak about let's say like Germans and Sinti and Roma. But this sentence already, in my point of view, it is racist. Why? Because it also says that Sinti and Roma are not part of the German society. If we say this, like German and Sinti and Roma, with this end, with this very one word, we say that we are not part of the society. And when we bringing into this 1990s, 2000, to the level of ethnographic studies when they were categorizing Romani people as animals, and also there were they were grouping us like group A, group B, like how group A going to the group B and what kind of dialogues and discussion. This is just a so clear social distance, and it was affecting a lot of policies. Like, for example, the group A and group B, for example, there is an ethnographic study in a village. Romani people, they were living in the settlements. They were usually the group B. And then there was the group A who were not living in the settlements. They were the non-Romani people. And then these ethnographers, they went down. They not really named that Roma, non-Roma, but everybody knows that this was Roma and non-Roma relations. But just to say out loud that this kind of categorization as group A and B was actually enforcing and labeling that there is a need to be group A and group B, which means that this was supporting school segregation, and also the segregation of Romani people outside of the villages. It's just simple group A, group B, and just very minor words. And they are not speaking about that we hate gypsies. I apologize for my beautiful language again. Yeah, so this is I think this is the critique of myself. So when I finished my PhD, as I mentioned, I'm very glad that I didn't write about Romani people, but I wrote about the Gajo perceptions. But also, what I did, when I read an ethnographic study or a study from, let's say, 1940s or 1990s, then subconsciously, because I'm part of the Romani community, this also, I don't like it, but because I'm Roma, my memories went back, like what's happened with me in 1992, what's happened with me in 1999 or 2000. And then I could question that this kind of lived experience which I had, it is valid or not. And I will tell a very dramatic example, which is one of my favorites, and it's a kind of promo for me now, because when I did my bachelor studies, I didn't know nothing about my mother and my parents. My mother passed away when I was 6 years old. My father became homeless. We were living on the street. So I don't want to stigmatize myself and put in these positions, but this was the reality anyway. And then, so I didn't know my family. I only had a photo of my mother, and which was very always with me until today. And I was studying Romani studies and communication and media studies as master and bachelor. And then on Romani studies, we had a lecture on Romani afterlives, like cultural afterlives, like what's happened if Romani people had passed away. We had to write an ethnographic essay. And I chose the topic afterlife, like as an essay. And then I went to the libraries, and I had a book, and I was flipping the pages, and I find my mother in the book. The book was written in 1984, and I don't know. It was like a turbulence, like what the hell is going on? Like why she's there? Why? What are they doing there? And I was flipping more and more on page, and I find my father, I find my aunts, my whole family. It was there, and I mean, of course, like what can we do in this case? But I just wanna go on the topic now, that this. So in that time, in 1984, my mother was pregnant with me. So we can see on the pictures that I'm on the picture, but in her tummy. But just to how it's changing this all back to like the different schools, how can changing with different Romani intellectuals involved, and I want to go to the point. So I will publish soon my monograph, which somehow will discuss this topic as well. And I wanted to put this photo, which I find in the library, of my mother. And surprise, surprise, I don't have copyright for that. I don't have, it's funny, but I don't have copyright of my own mother to place in a book or on the cover to honor her memory and our own lived experience. I was like, no way, this is a joke. And this is, I think it's important that we criticize and just understand like what's going on, like, and the funny things, I'm using this language like funny, which I shouldn't because I'm professional now, but that I met with this professor who took the photo in 4 years ago, in an academic conference. And at the time I was a professor also. And then I asked him, like, you know that you took photos of my family and mother and parents, and this is the context of the book. Not only, I mean, I'm happy that I have a photo of my mother, which I'm not owning, but I said, like, the context is pretty racist. And it's very based on deep ethnographic studies, and it's not okay. And I said to him, like I'm not agreeing with that because it is based on classic anthropology. And he said, like, I'm proud of that. He didn't apologize at all. What should I do with the apology? I took to my packet and going to sleep. I'm nothing. But the thing is that when you meet with your own subject or object, so in this case I'm an object, and questioning or asking, and then even with this distance, like they are proud of the knowledge which they're producing on the gypsies in the 1980s, still not changed. Was shocking. So this is the turn of critical Romani studies and 1980s ethnographic studies. So it is we have our memories or lived experiences, which is a kind of power we have to use wisely, but also we have to learn this academic language, which is access to the institutions, and it's challenging because we don't have our own vocabularies. All the vocabularies, all the frameworks, all the knowledge is based on non-Romani. That's why I said Romani agency or reparative Romani agency can be a kind of framework which challenge or bring back our ancestors' memories that can foster reparations. We can understand what is agency, and then we can speak about racism of the gypsy loreism. And just make again one more example, like in 1990s, Romani feminists, for example. I think they were struggling. I cannot speak about them name now, but I think they were struggling to develop a framework, which is Romani feminism, which was based on Afro-American feminism or movements. And now it's like 30, 40 years later, we use it like this. And this is them credit. We have to acknowledge, we have to respect and move it forward. And this is like Romani LGBTI. When we were start to speak about first Romani LGBTI, but like, what should be Roma queer, queer Roma, LGBTI Roma, Roma LGBTI? I mean, it's a whole of mess was, but we had to came up with a kind of solution. Like, if we want to speak with decision makers, then we have to agree. Like, Roma LGBTI intersectionality, very easy. But it was now it's easy. But we put these words frameworks together, and now we can speak about that. Like Romani feminists, they were advocating. You can see the placards, right? So those are the historical objects which are our treasure, and they should be in a museum as well. Sorry, I'm just love to speak.
We love this. Thank you. There's more questions.
I don't know if I need this. It's for you. Yes, sorry. So, hi Dezso. Super nice to see you. Thank you so much. I think you're always such a inspiring source of knowledge, and you open up so much for us to like also reclaim and understand that we do have a past, and we do have this past through the perspective not just anthropology and stuff, but also I think it's very important how you kind of sew everything together, including like the feminist movement and migration studies, racial studies. So I just wanted to say that as a comment, and so thank you also. And I do have a question in terms of how do we refer to like Romani knowledge production nowadays, and what are the lenses that we should be applying and frameworks, right? Because like, okay, so we are very critical of anthropological and ethnographical a lens onto Romani knowledge production, and then we're looking through like a feminist lens, and could we also talk for, I would say, perhaps even a post-humanist lens at some point? I think, how much can we go in front in terms of like what is nowadays like non-Romani knowledge production and methodologies? Like, do you understand? Like, what lenses would let's say a younger generation of a Romani researcher should apply?
What is the future for the next generation?
Yes.
So I believe and I hope that they will not struggle with this. This is my very short answer. That our previous generations, the first, second, and third Romani intellectuals, they were struggling a lot. They had their own fight. The first generation, they were fighting from the 1920s, if we speak about movements, from the 1920s until 1950s, 60s, to recognize us, that Romani people are part of the society. The second generation were advocating more about the recognition of cultural recognition. So the first was like we are human, and the second is about the cultural recognition, that we have a culture, we have a language. The third was advocating from the 1990s, 2000s, about the political involvement, political institutions, political recognition, institutions as well. And the nowadays generations, they claiming back the narratives through histories. And hopefully the next generation, actually the next generation, which is, if I may say, your generations, are bringing into the discourse of issues which were never ever discussed before, like lost voices of Romani LGBTI during the Holocaust, right? So because Romani LGBTI people, they were also murdered and executed and killed by the National Social Regime, right? So where are those voices? What are our NGO institutional responsibilities? I think, and I'm very critical towards myself, so we just made the baby steps, I mean, in this all Romani LGBTI movement, but your generation will just laugh at us, honestly, because that will be so advanced, because the knowledge is moving forward, and that's good, absolutely great, and I don't regret my studies which I wrote in 2010s or 15s, but if I read back, those were very amateurs. Those were very baby steps, and then it's okay. It was start something, but most probably I will think a little bit differently because we didn't have the knowledge, the capacity, the background, institutional backgrounds, and so on, so on. And hopefully the next generation will actually start to do institutions, museums, academic institutions, and different artistic places, which is actually can respectfully speak about our past or our future. Yeah,
this is already happening.
it's happening. Yes.
This is
Wait,
already.
we need the microphone. The microphone has to be turned on and off just for everybody to know, so we can hear it.
I feel that this is already happening and has been happening in the last 10 years when it comes to like access of Romani knowledge in institutionalized spaces. And, you know, I think also you do an amazing work with Romani Pen, just opening up like different doors, and this is happening. And I'm very, very excited for the work that has been done and very grateful because this day I can actually like think of, you know, like Romani knowledge production also. And, you know, like I'm really trying to think in terms of post-humanism and how we decentralize. And I say it's very valuable that, you know, you say, oh, we reclaim that humanity and now we decentralize and we say, we as Romani individuals were perhaps not, you know, the center of this, but we're part of a system, and not just a system of oppression, but also as much a system of like connection and empowerment. So we're looking at that, and I think without the research that has been done and all these waves that have been added upon it, this wouldn't be possible to think, because we would constantly have to reclaim and like research and look. There's still a lot of work to be done on the past, but I also am very excited on the work that can be done on the future of Romani knowledge production. So,
But Kat, this is the thing, like Romani people, they were always part of the society in every countries. But my question is why we are not knowing about them actions and them historical, participations. This is my only, because this is a kind of, erasing them. So they were erased by the memories. And I mean, this what I was kind of mentioning, like Esmeralda Locke. She was, I think it was a powerful feminist. She was an intellectual. Like it was in the 1890s, And then I'm pretty sure that before were also Romani feminists or Romani LGBT or Romani intellectuals, but now I think we just kind of scratching the stage where we can start to talk about them, and the next generations will have more and more people who can speak about them and speak about the public memories. And I don't want to divide the scholarship like Gajra and non-Romani scholarship, but I think it's important that we will speak about Romani contributions, about the Romani memories. Like, for example, like a huge debate in Spain about the flamenco, right? So just let's speak about that. Like flamenco is a Romani dance. It's pon, dot, it's dot, nothing more. It's not a Spanish dance, but the institution they're recognizing as a Spanish cultural heritage, and it is not. It is a Romani dance. So that's why we don't speak about that. That is not a Gajo dance. Yeah.
So I would like to open the floor for one more question, and then later on you will surely have time to speak more. Heidi? So I just opened the floor to one more question, so please.
Hello. I don't know. It's here? Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to bring attention to the scholars and academia, actually, because I experienced many contexts when addressing positioning is very controversial for the academics and scholars. And this is what you did, and introduce yourself. This is what I miss nowadays, that they're not taking the ownership. Who is talking actually to us, and what's your credibility, and what's your life experience or not? And this is very new thing, but I really want to stress what you did, that you let us into your word and the lenses you have. And this is something very important which I lack in many contexts, academia and university all around the world. I want to only share with one situation when me, as a part of the Roma youngsters, we had a school about the Holocaust, and there was one of the academics, and we didn't know who was she actually. And when we asked if she's of Roma origin, she just started to have her defense system. You know, it's like, why should I say who I am? No, it's like all of this stuff which I don't need to even give you. But what does it show us? You know, it's like, this is also thing. So let's be brave to ask people, like, who are they and why are they talking to us?
Yeah.
This is what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mtata. You provoked me with a kind of statement as well, because I wanted to say, and it's great opportunity, that today, and not only today, but in different academic platform, I can speak because I have a male gender. Honestly, it was a huge plus that a lot of Romani women intellectuals they facing with, because unfortunately academia is a very male-dominated space, and then sometimes, very often, I can have access because of my male gender, because I'm a Roma man. And I'm not telling this because I'm a super intellectual or super clever, but more often they want to see in them panel Roma man instead of a Romani woman. And when I was had my coming out in early times in academia, they said like they don't want Roma LGBTI, Roma gay in the academia. So then my position is just, went very low because it's a Roma gay, so it's not serious, so on and so on. And then I also have to say that sometimes we have to step back, as I have to step back as a Roma man from spaces, because I believe if we can step back, then I think the non-Romani people, they also sometimes they should step back and give spaces for the different oppressed people. Just have an example, and please don't take me wrong. When in early 2015, 16, 17, it was a huge hype of around Roma LGBTI, and people, they know my face in the different EU institutions, and they were asking us to organize panels, like Roma LGBTI panels, and then they always ask me to be a chair and be the leader, and I said clearly, I said to them, like, I'm organizing a panel, but if you give the leadership for a Romani trans person or a Romani lesbian person. Because unfortunately, because of my privilege, I had access to different communities, different institutions. And I try to kind of deconstruct these places as well. Like, okay, the outreach, I'm super happy, but there should be space for others. you know, I had my voice, I had my claims, but don't invite me always. And then I just had to deconstruct myself to this, not as an academic, not as a Roma man, but also as a person, like reflect. And I think it's important to position ourselves always, because the memories, it's flashing back. When you're reading these studies, as I mentioned, it's flashing back. I mean, it's very hard, super hard to just make it separate.
Thank you so much for ending on solidarity.
Oh.
And also we are very grateful that maybe sometimes also when one door closes, other open. So we are happy that we had you here at Romani Pen, which is full of agency, I would say, opening the space to our people. And so I was very glad that I was able to listen to you, and I'm sure that anybody who will listen to Romani Akademie information later on will also profit from this, and that you have left some very important notes that are important to Romani Pen as well, as honor your ancestors, look back at other Romani scholars and what they have done. We have had these discussions of like, where are our definitions, where are our words, and we are constantly, currently, always searching for more to be found out. I just heard that next year there will be more events. We don't know yet which ones, but so please make sure that you follow us on Instagram so you're informed about it. And you have one more word, and I gladly give it to you, and then I will end it finally.
So I would like to ask or request or, you know, just encourage that please order Magda Mateke's latest book, because I had the privilege to read as a commentator, and it's really brilliant. She gives a lot of academic framework which really understandable and can be translated to our own lived experiences, also in academia, but also she was creating academic frameworks in Romanes. So like racializations, oppressions, and so on and so on. So in that book of Magda Mateke, she did the work. I mean, she started to work and grounded the work of Romani knowledge production, which also shows that there are academic frameworks based on Romani lived experiences, and Romani language are accessible and can be. So order the book, read it. It's really amazing book.
Thank you. So now we're done with the advertisement part. We're here at the appreciation part, and we want to applaud you and thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, for giving us so much input, and for honoring us with your input. I also want to thank our interpreters who have been here all the time doing a hard job. And of course, I need to thank the Romani Pen team, without whom we wouldn't have anything. Also, please thank our cameraman, and look around you. There's a lot of excellent work happening here. Thank you.
It's beautiful. I never got flowers.
I hereby end this evening, and thank you all. See you next year.